Hello and welcome to the Hope Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Schmalhofer, and this is episode number 61 and the podcast episode for May. Today is a big day, as today is the first day that this podcast episode will be made available on YouTube as a full video podcast, in addition to being available as an audio podcast as we typically do. So today, the podcast episode is available as a full video format on YouTube. Please be patient with me as I make various updates and adjustments to this new YouTube video format. I know I still have much to learn about podcasting and much to learn about video podcasting as well. For the message today, one of the things I love about the recovery community is the strong sense of community and of fellowship, the gathering together around the common bond of recovery, and the common desire to help people be successful in recovery. Along with this sense of community and fellowship, there's also the strong sense of encouragement, to support and encourage each other to continue on in recovery. Even regardless of how long an individual might be in recovery, or even how recent a relapse might have been, there is a strong sense of support and encouragement. This support and encouragement is often expressed in recovery slogans as short phrases or expressions of recovery slogans that also include important recovery principles as well. But they really are much more than just catchy slogans or catchy sayings, as they really do actually point to key recovery principles. What I'd like to do today in this podcast episode is to share 5 of my top recovery slogans, and then to briefly share the recovery principle related to that slogan, and also a Bible verse that is related to that slogan and the biblical principle as well. So the title of this episode today is called The Top 5 Recovery Slogans. There are certainly many recovery slogans, and many could be used as the top 5 instead of these. But at least for today, this is what I have as the top 5 recovery slogans. And I start with number 1. The first slogan is "One day at a time." This is a great slogan and a great recovery principle. The focus is only on today. The focus is staying clean and sober today. The focus is not on staying clean and sober for 20 years or 30 years, just staying clean and sober today for 24 hours. The Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book speaks to this very topic on page 188 when it says this. The next question they asked was, "You can quit 24 hours, can't you?" I said, "Sure. Yes, anybody can do that for 24 hours. They said, "That's what we're talking about. Just 24 hours at a time." That sure did take a load off of my mind. Every time I'd start thinking about drinking, I would think of the long, dry years ahead without having a drink. But this idea of 24 hours that it was up to me from then on was a lot of help. End quote. Many in recovery will slightly revise this slogan from 1 day at a time to 1 hour at a time, or even 1 minute at a time. This slogan, "1 day at a time," does such a great job of changing the focus to only today, not on 1 year or 20 years or 30 years, but the focus is only on today, to be successful in recovery today. And it helps change the focus to do the next right thing today, to make the next right choice for today, to make the next right decision right now today, to do whatever is necessary to be successful in recovery today, just one day at a time. I'd like to share a Bible verse that I think relates well to this slogan of one day at a time. And it is Psalm 118, verse 24. That says, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." This is the day that the Lord has made. We are to focus on today and on what God has for us today. Do not miss the simple message that this is the day that the Lord has made. So look for what God has for you today. Do not look beyond today. This passage encourages us to stay focused on today, and to not only stay focused on today, but to rejoice and be glad in it. Likely, if you pause and reflect on today and the blessings of today, you will see there is much to rejoice in and much to be glad about. So for you today, I encourage you to remember to take your recovery one day at a time, to stay focused on today and being successful in recovery today, not 20 years or 30 years in the future. And to remember, this is the day that the Lord has made. Do not look past today, but stay focused on today, one day at a time. Do whatever is necessary to be successful in recovery, and see what God has for you even today. And then number 2, the second slogan is keep coming back. This slogan and recovery principle is all about attending meetings. Find AA and NA meetings and faith-based meetings, and then attend. And then keep coming back. And I would say to also find a home church, and then to keep coming back there as well. It is in this way, by attending these meetings, that you will build your recovery community. This quote from Narcotics Anonymous on page 160 does a great job of describing the importance of the slogan, keep coming back, when it says this: "I started going to meetings, and although they didn't calm my fears at first, I kept coming back. I grew fascinated by the new language, acceptance, humility, amends, open-mindedness, and higher power. Thanks to NA, I felt I was finally going to learn how to live, and I realized I had so much to learn." End quote. It is in these fellowships, these meetings, if you keep coming back, where you can be encouraged, where you can learn from others, where you can see and hear evidence of hope that recovery is possible, where you can just not be alone, but be surrounded by others who share your desire to be clean and sober. For me, this is a key underlying principle of this slogan: to surround yourself with like-minded people that share your desire to be clean and sober, and that share your love for God as well. The Bible verse for this slogan is Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And it says this: "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. End quote. Spur one another on in recovery and in love and good deeds of service for one another. And do not give up meeting together, but rather keep coming back to nurture and build your recovery community and to surround yourself with people that share your desire to be clean and sober and share your love for God as well. For you today, I encourage you to carefully and intentionally consider the meetings you should attend and then continue to attend. Keep coming back. Your meetings and your recovery community are critical, especially in early recovery. So I encourage you to find your meetings and then to keep coming back. And then number 3, the third slogan is nothing changes if nothing changes. This recovery principle sounds simple and seems logical and even practical, but it is hard and takes courage to acknowledge that changes are needed. And then it takes courage to actually make the changes. This slogan, nothing changes if nothing changes, is all about making honest changes to be successful in recovery. Making the changes necessary to stop drinking and to stop using. This slogan and principle highlights that recovery is not about just trying harder or being more determined. Rather, it is all about making changes, doing something different than before, making the dramatic changes to be successful in recovery. Nothing changes if nothing changes. This slogan also highlights the important question, are you willing to do whatever is necessary to be successful in recovery? Are you ready and willing to make whatever changes are necessary to be successful in recovery? These dramatic changes are reflected in the AA quote from page 143 that says, it says this, to get over drinking will require a transformation of thought and attitude. We all had to place recovery above everything, for without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. This quote indicates this dramatic change is all about a transformation. To be willing to do whatever is necessary to be successful in recovery, because nothing changes if nothing changes. The thought of making these dramatic changes reminds me of the Bible passage from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, that says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. End quote. Recovery is not easy, and making these dramatic changes will indeed require you to be strong and courageous. For you today, I encourage you to carefully consider the changes, and yes, even the dramatic changes that you need to make to be successful in recovery, to stop drinking and to stop using. And I encourage you to be strong and courageous, to make whatever changes are necessary for you to be successful in recovery, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And then number 4, the fourth slogan is progress, not perfection. This recovery principle highlights the reminder that you are not perfect and that your recovery will not be perfect. The goal is not perfection. Rather, the goal is to continue moving forward in recovery, to continue learning from the past and even from recent mistakes so that you can continue making progress in your recovery. AA has a quote that speaks directly to this principle of the 12 steps. As it states on page 60, it says this: "Many of us exclaimed, 'What an order! I can't go through with it.' Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. These principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection." This quote from AA clearly brings in the spiritual perspective of recovery and the spiritual perspective of the 12 steps. This AA quote indicates that the slogan, "Progress, not perfection," is also very much about spiritual progress and not spiritual perfection, and that the 12 steps of recovery include a spiritual component. Progress, not perfection, certainly includes the aspect of moving forward in recovery and to learn from the past and to continue making progress in your recovery. But this AA quote also expresses that the 12 steps require a spiritual component, that to be successful in recovery will include spiritual progress. This idea of spiritual progress is expressed in the Bible passage of James chapter 5, verse 1, where it states, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." For you today, I encourage you to remember that you do not need to be perfect in your recovery. The important thing, though, is to continue making progress in your recovery, to continue to learn from your past, even your recent past. And I encourage you to not overlook or dismiss the spiritual aspect of recovery. It is clear that the 12 steps very much include a spiritual component. And I encourage you to consider what this spiritual progress means for you and for your recovery. And then number 5, the 5th slogan is "Let go and let God." This recovery principle brings the idea of a higher power front and center. It brings the spiritual component of your recovery front and center. And it highlights that you cannot do recovery by yourself. Just as you need a recovery community, this slogan and principle indicate you need to bring God into your life as well. For some people, this may be a difficult step, but you do not need to understand everything about God. You simply need to recognize that there is a God in heaven and that He is a loving, caring, and compassionate God who wants to help you and wants to help you to be successful in recovery. While this may not be your experience with church or even religious people, I encourage you to be open to a brand new experience with God and to not let your past perceptions of God prevent you from embracing this new principle that says to let go and let God. There is a quote from Narcotics Anonymous that gives a great description of this principle when it says on page 99, it says this: ongoing recovery is dependent on our relationship with a loving God who cares for us and who will do for us what we find impossible to do for ourselves. End quote. And AA has a similar quote on page 84 that says, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. This slogan and principle, to let go and let God, can be applied in many ways. But it seems clear that in some way we are to let go and let God, that we are to let God help us in recovery, and that we are to bring God into our life in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps the Bible verse that best expresses God's love and care for us is in the passage John 3:16, where it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." For you today, I encourage you to be open to this principle, to let go and let God, and to consider that there is indeed a God in heaven, and that he is a loving, caring, and compassionate God who wants to help you to be successful in recovery. A God who will do for you what is impossible for you to do for yourself. Wherever you are at with God, I ask you to consider bringing God into your life so that you can start to let go and to let God. So briefly, to summarize these top 5 recovery slogans, they are: first, one day at a time; second, keep coming back; and third, nothing changes if nothing changes; and then fourth, progress, not perfection; and fifth, let go and let God. That is what I have for you today. Thank you very much for joining me on the Hope Recovery Podcast. And remember, there is always hope with God. Take care, and God bless you all. That concludes the podcast episode for today. But if I may, let me remind you, if you are interested in more faith-based recovery resources, please see the website at www.HopeRecoveryUs. And if there is any way I can help you or your recovery group or recovery ministry, please feel free to email me at HopeRecoveryUs@gmail.com, and I would be happy to talk with you further. And again, take care, and God bless you all.